The US boom of the 1920s was primarily due to the introduction of mass production. How accurate is this view? So obviously in this question you are going to need to quantify the degree to which you agree or disagree with this and other contributing factors, and quantify their relative importance as well. In an introduction, please recall we are looking for a context, we're looking for plan, and we're looking for the development of an argument, possibly even going as far as providing the conclusion. The US mass production techniques pioneered by Ford and refined by the scientific management of Taylorism had a massive impact upon the US economy. Some context, but also a definite statement quantifying that we are talking about a significant factor. Yet, the work of Ford predated World War I and clearly requires other contributing factors needed to be explored. I will argue that the boom of the 1920s was the consequence of a combination of factors, primarily that of World War I and the impact of Republican policies, not mass production. Both of these in combination provided a massive short-term impetus for the growth of the US economy, as well as ultimately laying the long-term foundations for the subsequent crash of 1929. Now this last sentence is going beyond the remit of the question, but nonetheless shows a wider understanding of the context of which the question is set. Mass production contributed hugely to the advantage the US achieved over her competitors, but the lack of effective unions, near religious fervour in celebrating wealth and entrepreneurship, and new psychology of consumption founded on unprecedented prosperity brought about by the war played its part. So a lot of other factors other than just mass production. World War I was not just followed by a dislocation in the US economy after 1918 as the US moved from a wartime to a peacetime economy. It was an unprecedented dislocation in the global economic cycle, whose subsequent aftershocks would be felt over 2 decades. The established order centred on the imperial European economies was shattered and revolutionised the US economic position. Transformed from a debtor into the world's leading creditor nation, the US experienced unprecedented wealth on a size and scale never before witnessed. It changed America both economically and socially, creating the world's first consumer society, and more profoundly, creating a modern psychology of consumption. Such an opportunity was fertile soil for the innovative production techniques of Ford and other businessmen eager to implement his new practices. US shops were flooded with consumer goods and with a disposable income enough, but far from all Americans were able to buy themselves a standard of living and social mobility never witnessed before. The mass production techniques of Ford were clearly therefore significant and predate World War I. Nonetheless, I feel it is World War I that turns Ford's innovations into a revolution that affected the whole of the US economy. So we're dealing with the question, we're dealing with other contributing factors, we're quantifying and establishing a hierarchy of those factors in accordance with the question of how far did they each relate to America's subsequent boom. Additionally, as the US moved from war to peace, the Republicans campaigned on a return to normalcy, a desire to return the US to a more traditional role. Big government regulation and high taxation would be replaced by laissez-faire government and lower taxes. High wartime regulation of business would be replaced by Coolidge's dictum that the business of America is business. Such aspirations created even more disposable wealth, which the public spent on more consumer goods, fueling in turn the continuation of the post-war boom. Mass production, again returning to the question, clearly assisted in this, driving down prices and fueling the cycle of prosperity. Nonetheless, however, attempting to quantify, again I feel that the role of the war and the policies of the Republican Party were more significant in amplifying the boom. Mass production was a spark to the boom, but the policies of Harding and his successors were the fuel. So again in this second paragraph we introduce the second theme. If paragraph 1 was quantifying the significance of the war, paragraph 2 is now focusing on the significance of Republican policies. And each paragraph quantifies the significance of the new theme that's introduced, compares it against the thrust of the question, which is the mass production techniques, and comes to a conclusion. Therefore, in conclusion, I feel that the role of mass production was significant in creating the boom of the 20s. However, I feel that other contributing factors amplified and fueled the boom far beyond the initial innovations of mass production and Taylorism. In the long term, it would be shown that mass production was indeed good for the US economy, but the war and Republican policies mismanaged and made unsustainable its initial benefits.